Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, a few very interesting news updates, and we've got a couple of trade rumors involving the Blues, the Avalanche, the Red Wings, and the Montreal Canadiens. We'll get to all the updates from our past couple of days coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this with all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, and don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. So as per usual, another news and rumor video here to discuss. We'll start off by looking at a few signings from our past couple of days. So over the past couple of days, we only saw one NHL signing, and that was in the Columbus Blue Jackets organization as RFA Pyyhita. Pyyhita is one of the younger prospects in the Columbus Blue Jackets organization. He's 23 years old. He's a winger. He was an RFA, so he was in need of a new contract. He gets a one-year contract extension with the AAV of league minimum in the Columbus Blue Jackets organization. So that's not a bad deal there for the Jackets like Pyyhita. He's more of an up-and-coming young player. He probably won't be an NHL regular next year, but I could easily see him be a call-up option. This past year, he got into 47 NHL games, putting up 4 goals and 7 points. Also played in 28 AHL games, putting up 3 goals and 16 points. So like I said, still more of an AHL level guy, but especially if the Jackets run into injuries again this upcoming season, Pyyhita is going to be one of the first players that the Jackets call up. So not a bad signing here. I think a league minimum for a solid call-up option who's also a younger type player. That's not a bad deal there for the Jackets. So very interesting note there, but the Jackets have signed Pyyhita to a 1-year league minimum deal to keep him on their roster. So very interesting note there, but that's the only signing from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of news updates. So to start with, we got a retirement from our past couple of days. We talked about a retirement a couple of videos ago involving Kyle Clifford. Well, there has been another recent retirement, and that was in the Pittsburgh Penguins organization, as Chad Ruhwedel has announced his retirement from the NHL. So Ruhwedel was never a regular NHL level player, but he was a very solid utility type player, a guy who could be 6'7" guy on the blue line. Was never a regular NHL third pair defenseman, but could easily get into some options. He played, I think, with Pittsburgh, the Rangers, and there were a couple of other teams he played with. In his career, he wound up having 13 goals, 50 points in 369 career NHL games. So he was a guy who was usually a fringe NHL player. Most of the time was a guy who was like a 7th defenseman on a team's roster. There were times at some points too he was placed on waivers and an AHL level guy. So very interesting note there, like with the lack of veteran players being signed right now, I don't think it's too much of a surprise that Ruhwedel has decided to hang up his skates. But still very interesting note there that one of the long-time NHL 10-year players, even though he only played 369 games, he spent a handful of really good seasons in the NHL, has officially called it quits. So very interesting note there, as one of the veteran defensemen is off the UFA market and has retired. Next, going over to 3 players who have signed overseas. Very interesting note there. Now all of these guys are players who probably will spend this upcoming season in the AHL level. So instead of signing an AHL level contract, being paid to play in the AHL, they've gone overseas. And that was Emil Bemstrom, Joe Blandisi, and Rocco Grimaldi. Grimaldi has had some prior NHL experience, but been basically an AHL player over the past number of seasons. He has signed over in the KHL, so he will go over to Russia. We shall see how he does. Joe Blandisi has been a long-time AHL level player, really hasn't gone to very much, if any, NHL action, so not too surprising to see that he wasn't able to get an NHL contract, so he goes over to Russia as well, signs in the KHL, so very interesting note there. A couple of long-time AHL players signed over the KHL, while Emil Bemstrom, who has actually had some NHL experience in the past with Columbus and Pittsburgh, as a solid like bottom 6 forward, call-up option type guy, really didn't get an NHL opportunity after he was a UFA, so he winds up signing in the Swiss League. So very interesting note there. Bemstrom, I still think, could wind up making a return to the NHL at a later date because he is still on the younger side of things, but after not getting an NHL opportunity, he winds up going overseas. So very interesting note there, but Bemstrom in the Swiss League, while Blandisi and Grimaldi in the KHL have all signed overseas. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to a final resolution when it comes to the Ryan Johansen termination case. Now, it was about a year ago that the Philadelphia Flyers, after he wound up not clearing waivers and there was some sort of injury debacle with the Philadelphia Flyers after he was acquired, not last trade deadline, but the trade deadline prior. With 1 year left on his deal last offseason, the Flyers, after saying that there were grounds for termination, decided to terminate Ryan Johansen's contract. Johansen filed a grievance against it, and they've finally come to terms on a resolution, and the resolution is that the Flyers do win the Johansen case. There was grounds for a rightful termination. So there's no real updates when it comes to who's going to be paid out what. Like, is Johansen going to be paid that $4 million he was owed by the Philadelphia Flyers? Is he not going to get any of it at all? Like, we're not exactly sure what the settlement was for that, but they were confirmed that the Philadelphia Flyers did win the Ryan Johansen case, and the Flyers were right to terminate him. So very interesting note there, but the Flyers have won that case, and whether there's some cap relief coming to Philadelphia or Johansen's getting the entire $4 million of cap hit, I'm not exactly sure it's that, but Philadelphia has won that case. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to the Minnesota Wild, a couple of recent updates have speculated that there's been no real updates when it comes to Marco Rossi and Kirill Kaprizov's current contract extensions. Now, Kaprizov isn't as pressing as Rossi because Rossi is currently a RFA who is unsigned, while Kaprizov is entering the final year of his deal. Now, Kaprizov is a lot more important to this team than Marco Rossi is. There's been some people who have said that Marco Rossi will not sign a contract until Kaprizov is extended, so I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen. I think once training camp starts to come around, the Wild get all of their players back to training camp, including Rossi and Kaprizov. I think it'll be a lot more easier to get those two signed. Like I said, I think Kaprizov is going to be one of the highest paid NHL players in the entire NHL. Probably sign like a 6 to 8 year deal, like $13 to $14 million to remain with the Minnesota Wild. While Rossi, I still think a bridge deal of 2 to 3 years at like $4 or $5, maybe $6 million will be the smart move there for the Wild. So once again, no real concrete updates when it comes to both the Minnesota Wild trying to sign Marco Rossi and Kirill Kaprizov. So we'll have to keep posted on that. And lastly, going over to the Ottawa Senators, their AHL affiliates in Belleville have apparently extended their stay in Belleville. Belleville, who's entering the last year of their arena contract with the arena that they play in. Apparently, Michael Anlauer recently announced that they have a 3-year extension, so they will be able to play in Belleville until the 2030 season. And there's an option out there to extend it 5+ years, so they will be in Belleville for the next 4 seasons, and there's a possibility it could be in there for the next 9. So very interesting note there. Ottawa likes to have their AHL affiliates in Belleville, so to see them come to terms on a contract extension with their arena, that's pretty good. So very interesting note there. But those are all the updates from the past couple of days, as the AHL Senators are going to stay in Belleville for the next handful of seasons. There's no updates when it comes to the Rossi and Kaprizov situation. The Flyers won the Johansen termination case. Ruhwedel has retired from the NHL, and Grimaldi, Blandisi and Bemstrom have all signed overseas. So very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we got a couple of trade rumors here to talk about. First, when it comes to the St. Louis Blues, I saw an article recently, once again, nothing linked to any sold source or any really reasonable insider. I think this was just some more speculation, but there was an article out there that I saw saying that the St. Louis Blues could consider moving a few forwards before the season starts. Now, the reasoning for this is the Blues do have a extremely deep forward group. Like, they have a really solid group. Like, you got Thomas, you got Buchnevich, you got Suter now, Buksa was added this offseason. There were a couple of other guys to really strengthen that forward group. You still got Texier, you still got Shen. Like, there's a whole bunch of really solid top 9 forwards on the St. Louis Blues roster. So they got a decent enough size roster that they can ice probably 13 to 14 on their everyday lineup. But on top of that, they do have a couple of really solid, bright future prospects who could be cracking the NHL this offseason. And that's guys like Jimmy Snuggerud, who I think's at this point in time a lock to make it into the lineup this upcoming season. But you also got a couple of guys who could be fringe NHLers, like a Dalibor Dvorsky, who might be able to carve out like a third-line role if he has a really good training camp, or Nikita Alexandrov, who a couple of years ago had a really solid stint at the NHL level, was more of an AHL level guy last year, and after the signing that he had this offseason, could try and push for NHL opportunities. So with all that in mind, the Blues could have upwards of like 14 to 15 players challenging for lineup on opening night. So with that in mind, that has led some people to think they could look to move a player before the season starts. Now, the two names that sort of came to mind in this article were Oscar Sundqvist and Mathieu Joseph. Now, those two names make some sense. I think both guys are entering the final year of their deals. Joseph has, I think, just over a $2 million AAV. Sundqvist at around a $1 million AAV, so it'd be easier to move Sundqvist with his cap hit. Both Sundqvist and Joseph are bottom 6 forwards. Joseph's a lot more speedy. He's younger. He has more upside than a guy like Sundqvist does. but Sundqvist is a lot cheaper, more of a utility type player, and could work really well in the center or wing on the fourth line. So with that in mind, it would really be interesting to see if the Blues do consider moving them. They don't have to move someone, like their cap situation is not overly bad, and they do have enough forwards to ice the roster, so they don't really have to move anyone. But if guys like Dvorsky or a guy like Alexandrov really push well in training camp, you could see the St. Louis Blues try and move one of those two guys. So we will see on that, and I definitely could see the Blues try and move off maybe one forward extra, especially if a guy like Dvorsky makes the roster. So very interesting note there, but keep your eye on the Blues as they could be looking to move a forward this upcoming training camp. Next, going over to Colorado Avalanche, another article I saw, once again not from any insiders linking it or anything, this is just speculation, but I saw an article recently stating that the Avs could still look to move 3 players that are on their current roster. Now the Avs, while they're not in the worst cap situation in the entire NHL, they're not a great one. I think they have like around $1 to $2 million in cap space. Their bottom 6 is pretty beat up. They have a solid top 6 on their current team. They also have a really solid defense and a really solid goaltending, but like that bottom 6, the depth on the forward group, like it's really not anywhere close to where it needs to be. So with that in mind, they could look to try and move a couple of players to free up some cap space, or look to try and move some players from a position of strength to add somewhere in position of weakness. The 3 guys mentioned in this article were Ross Colton, Sam Girard, and Martin Necas. Now Necas, they do not want to move. The Avalanche would love to keep Martin Necas, but Necas is entering the final year of his deal. He's a UFA. If the Avalanche cannot extend him, then he needs to get moved, because the Avs cannot have another Mikko Rantanen situation on their hands entering the trade deadline. So with that in mind, I could see Necas get moved sometime at training camp, maybe just before the season starts, if the Avs can't come to terms on a long-term extension with Martin Necas. So that's a name that we really have to watch out for. When it comes to Colton, Girard, both are making $4+ million. Colton's a really solid like middle 6 forward. Girard's a solid second, third pair puck moving defenseman. Girard, I think, got 1 or 2 years left at a $5 million cap hit. Colton's got 3 years left at a $4 million cap hit. So like those guys being moved would definitely free up some cap space for the Avs to do some other things. I think Girard's a little more likely than Colton because of the depth that the Avs have with Girard in their lineup, but I definitely think they could try and move Colton too. So we'll have to wait and see on that. I think Necas will definitely get moved, or at least be considered moving, if he's not going to sign a long-term extension with the Avalanche. While Colton, Girard, with their cap hits, they make perfect trade chips. So we shall wait and see on that. Next, going over to the Edmonton Oilers. When it comes to them, Cam Robinson of the Elite Prospects website was talking about them recently. Once again, not a very connected insider, but has had some good insights in the past. And he says, according to a couple of recent sources he's talked to, the Oilers have checked in with the Detroit Red Wings about a goaltender. Now, we talked about the Oilers, how they really need a goaltender. Skinner, Picard, the last couple of seasons, well, they have gotten them to the Cup final. They have not given them great goaltending in the Cup final. I personally think the Oilers are poised for a step back this upcoming season. Maybe not. We shall wait and see. But I could definitely see that happen. So a lot of people have said the Oilers really need to make some sort of a goaltending move. And there's been some recent speculation about Tristan Jarry. If he was placed on waivers, Michael DiPietro made some sense. But another name that seems to be coming up according to Cam Robinson is Sebastian Cossa. Now, Cossa's a really solid goalie prospect in the Red Wings organization. Like, he's a really solid goalie prospect. Now, the one thing that the Red Wings could look to move Cossa because is they have Augustine. Augustine is in the college right now. He hasn't signed an NHL level contract, but he is a fantastic potential future starter at the NHL level. So with that in mind, if they have Augustine, that makes Cossa expendable. Now, I do think long term, if they had an Augustine-Cossa tandem, that would be beautiful for the Detroit Red Wings going forward. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee by any means they even entertain the possibility of moving Cossa. But with Augustine in their system, it makes Cossa expendable. And if the Oilers made an offer worthwhile, it would make some sense from the Red Wings side, especially if they were able to get some sort of forward help or something like that. So once again, no guarantees this happens. I think this is a little bit of an out there scenario. But if the Oilers put together a really solid package, I could see the Red Wings have some interest in that. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But keep around the Detroit Red Wings, as they might be able to hook up on a deal with the Edmonton Oilers, dealing Cossa to them. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to Anthony D'Amico. He was talking about the Montreal Canadiens about how Carey Price could be traded after September 1st. Now, Price, ever since the Habs went to the Stanley Cup final in 2021 in the shortened season, Price has been on long-term injury reserve. He suffered a very bad season-ending, career-ending injury in those playoffs, and he hasn't been able to play since. He's got 1 year, I think, left on his contract at a $10.5 million cap hit. Now, if the Habs were to keep Price on their contract, he'll go back on long-term injury reserve, but the Habs really want to try and get out of the long-term injury reserve stuff. So there's been some talk that after his next contract's paid, or his next bonus is paid, wherever it is, which is I think like $7.5 million of his remaining contract on September 1st, there's only about like $2 million left in actual cash that the team has to pay to Price, and that would make that sort of a contract extremely entertaining. Now, there've been a lot of teams that have been mentioned, mostly Chicago and San Jose, because the Sharks and the Hawks could be looking to move some UFAs come the trade deadline. They could get close to going under the cap floor. You have Price's contract. It's going to keep them above the cap floor. Another team that I personally do think could try and make some sort of a deal for Price would be the Pittsburgh Penguins, especially if they are considering moving Russ, Drake, and Carlson. Moving all three of those guys, even if they retain a little bit on Carlson, would get them really close to the cap floor. So I could see, especially if they consider moving one of them before training camp, the Penguins be a team who tries to get Price and try and add him to their lineup. I could definitely see that too. So we shall wait and see on that. Once again, no guarantees by any means, but this makes total sense in my opinion. If there's a bottom dwelling team out there who thinks that they are going to get close to the cap floor, closer to the trade deadline, trading for Price would make a whole bunch of sense. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Probably not going to hear anything about this until after his current bonus thing is paid off on September 1st, but this is going to be a very interesting situation to watch going forward. So we shall wait and see on that, but that's all I'm going to talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think about the Montreal Canadiens? Could they move Carey Price before the season starts? And if so, could Chicago, San Jose, Pittsburgh be potential landing spots? Could the Oilers try and acquire Cossa? Do the Avalanche move one of Gerard, Colton, or Natchez? And do the Blues move one of Sundqvist or Joseph? Definitely your thoughts on all that, plus all the updates and the signings down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you're liking to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. I also do a blog, talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll link that in the description below. Cannot wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.